Gallons upon gallons of hazardous wastewater are right now here in the Houston area. And it's water runoff from that hazardous train derailment in Ohio and will be treated at a plant in Deer Park. KPRC 2's Bill Barajas joining us now live from downtown, where Harris County Judge Lina Hidalgo, Bill, expressed some concern about that toxic water and about not being notified that it was coming to Harris County.
Harris County Judge Lina Hidalgo tells us she learned today that some of that firefighting water was already here in Harris County and more was to come in the coming days and weeks. She called it a breakdown in communication, that she was just finding out this information and was honest and clear about some of the questions and concerns she had when we're talking about the safety and the disposal of this toxic water.
I also want folks to know there are many things we don't know that we should know. That doesn't mean that something is wrong, and I want to stress that point. The company has assured us that they're storing the firefighting water, quote, in a way that removes the risk to water, groundwater, air emissions, and protects public health.
Harris County Judge Lina Hidalgo was quick to point out her concerns, not just over the contaminated water, but over the process to bring it here to be disposed of. The toxic wastewater, according to Hidalgo, was used to extinguish a fire following the train derailment on February 3rd in Ohio. Water being transported here by a Deer Park company called Texas Molecular. We're told so far about 500,000 gallons have been transported here to Harris County. About 2 million are expected total. Judge Hidalgo saying she has a lot of questions.
There are three major concerns. First, the concern about what exactly is being injected into the injection wells and what kind of chemical reactions there might be. The second concern is about the human health from the transport and the health of the workers. Third, the concern about why this water is coming all the way to Texas.
Environment Canada is actively monitoring the impacts to Ontario after a train derailed in Ohio, sparking a massive fire and sending toxic fumes into the air. East Palestine is about 500 kilometers from Toronto, 270 kilometers south of Niagara Falls, and while experts say toxins could travel through the air towards Ontario, they should have little impact on people locally. Despite that, environmental groups are watching the possible impacts to Ontarians closely.
The problem with these chemicals is that they're invisible, so it would be prudent to test water and snow samples just to see if we have been affected in Ontario by this tragedy.
On February 3rd, a freight train carrying hazardous materials derailed in East Palestine, Ohio. After the train burned for 2 days, emergency crews conducted a controlled burn of several rail cars, releasing toxic fumes into the air and prompting an evacuation. At least 14 cars carrying vinyl chloride were exposed to fire. The toxic gas is used to produce plastic and can pose health risks to humans.
When that gas is burnt, it actually creates other hazardous byproducts.
Environment Canada tells us it is in contact with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and other counterparts to monitor the situation. Typically, the chemical involved in the controlled release to the air, vinyl chloride, only lasts in the atmosphere for less than 24 hours, they said in a statement, adding they take pollution incidents and threats to the environment very seriously.
Vinyl chloride, it might not stay in the air for very long. It dissolves in a couple of days, but it is highly mobile in water. It is highly mobile in soils, and it can infiltrate groundwater systems and stay there for years.
As the situation continues to unfold, experts tell us governments need to be transparent about which chemicals are being monitored, how much was spilled, what they are testing for in the air, groundwater, and soil, and what they are finding.
These kinds of tragedies are avoidable. We need to be prioritizing human health, environmental health when we're putting out chemicals into the market.
Tonight, with the scene being cleaned up, new details about what caused the fiery derailment. Federal investigators saying a preliminary investigation shows an overheated wheel bearing likely to blame.
This was 100% preventable.
The NTSB says the train passed over 2 detectors, which showed the bearing was heating up. By the time it hit a 3rd detector, it was 253 degrees above air temperature, triggering an audible alarm to warn the crew, who then slowed and stopped the train.
This is a community that is suffering. This is not about politics. What I care about is figuring out how this happened.
The NTSB chair says there's no evidence the crew did anything wrong. In a statement, Norfolk Southern says our highest priority is the safety of our people and the communities we serve, adding it will continue to support the NTSB's investigation. While today, Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg visited for the first time after criticism from some residents that he should have come sooner, demanding the nation's rail operators stop resisting safety measures to cut costs.
Let's get people from both sides of the aisle to the table and come to agreement on some steps that are needed, even if the rail industry is pushing back.
Meanwhile, near the crash, the Figleys only come back to their small farm to check on things like their chickens. They're part of a class action lawsuit that attorneys say includes over 500 residents.
I live out of my car and at my daughter's house. It's awful. I feel homeless.
Why won't you come back home?
Because I don't know what I'm coming home to, and I'm 70 years old.
Meanwhile, federal officials have released a preliminary report on the cause of the train derailment that spilled toxic chemicals in Ohio. It comes nearly 3 weeks after the crash, and residents are demanding answers. ABC News transportation correspondent Gio Benitez joins me live now for more on this. Gio, I know that you're combing through this report right now. Does anything stick out so far?
Yeah, Diane, right now it looks like they're focusing very heavily on the wheel bearing, and they're saying that potentially overheated. And this is what they say. They say surveillance video from a local resident showed what appeared to be a wheel bearing in the final stage of overheat failure moments before the derailment. The wheel bearing and affected wheel set have now been collected as evidence and will be examined by the NTSB.
Welcome back to CBS Mornings. It's been nearly 3 weeks since a fiery train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio, exposed an entire community to potentially hazardous chemicals. Now the EPA says it's taking over the cleanup process and ordering rail operator Norfolk Southern to pay for it. Now there are calls for change to make sure nothing like this ever happens again. But the question now is, how did this happen in the first place? Roxana Sabiri has been looking into that, and she's in Youngstown, Ohio. Roxana, good to see you. People there have a lot of questions still.
They do. Good morning, Gail. The NTSB report detailing the causes of this incident is not expected for another year or so. But there are several factors in the ways trains operate across the country that could have contributed to this disaster. A disaster that has left many people in this community frustrated and scared.
While people here wait to learn about possible health risks, officials are stepping up pressure on Norfolk Southern.
In the face of Norfolk Southern's arrogance and incompetence, I want you to know we are fighting back.
EPA Administrator Michael Regan announced he was ordering the rail operator to pay for the whole cleanup of East Palestine, or suffer the consequences. But the kind of train that derailed in East Palestine highlights a growing cost-cutting strategy in the rail industry, known as precision scheduled railroading, which seeks to streamline rail operations by lengthening trains while cutting the workforce. The train that derailed on February 3rd stretched 9,300 feet long, weighed a whopping 18,000 tons, and had around 150 cars.